Wonderful. Great. Okay. So good evening, everyone. Um, so this will be a hopefully fun, entertaining, and educational um, presentation on the transition and working stages of group therapy. Um, let's see. Great. I had it working flawlessly before. Let's see. Oh my God, why isn't this working? It was just working. I promise you. Okay. So I'll just do that then. No, it's not moving then. It was just doing this. I was just practicing it with it. Huh. Are you seeing learning objectives or no? No, right?
No, we still see your first, like the first slide.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. All right. So some learning objectives. So this is what I hope to accomplish this evening with you is describe the dynamics associated with the group process and developments. And this is part of the CareCREP Standard B. That should say standard, not stand B. Identify and understand key characteristics of group during transition and working stages of group, and review notions of resistance, confrontation, and problematic behaviors, and also address issues of avoidance, transference, and countertransference in groups. So the transitional stage, this is kind of fun in that this is where you really get to hone your skills as a counselor, and you have group members coming together. You've done the initial stage; they've kind of gotten the ground rules and that sort of thing. But there's still this level of anxiety and defensivism. Sorry, they are defensive at this particular stage still. They're quite not sure what to do with themselves. Some group members are sharing, some aren't sharing. Some group members will even try to test the other group members, for example, to kind of assess just how, like, where they are, like what's the hierarchy, who's the group leader, how, and I don't mean the facilitator, I mean like within the group, who's going to take on like a primary role if that should emerge, right? And really to determine if this is a safe place. Group members will open up at different speeds and under different circumstances too. So you might have the ones that talk, and you might have ones that take maybe a session or two to start talking. And this is where your leadership skills as a counselor really will come into play, because you need to develop an environment where you are a trustworthy person, where you are reliable as the group leader, and you have to be consistent, and you need to attend to the group process and content, right? You're managing that, and to make sure that this is in fact a safe place for the group members to be. So the unwillingness of clients to share is really going to be your biggest obstacle. And I don't necessarily mean verbally sharing, like opening their mouth and talking. I mean like really talking about what it is that they need to be talking about. So you may encounter some challenging group members, and I'm only going to talk about a few of them, but there's probably about 11 or so, and you can find them in your book. But these are probably going to be the more common ones that you encounter. And so the silent or the lack of participation, right? That's the one where this person is really going to stay quiet, stay in the back, may need to be called on. Even when you're in a circle, right? That person is going to maybe be sitting back, their body language will be disengaged. They're wrestling with a lot of fears, okay? Fear with regards to how consistent or how strong the group facilitator is going to be, not really knowing maybe how group counseling works. maybe fear of rejection, maybe even fear of confidentiality, because for all intents and purposes, these could be new people, and you're just kind of grouping them together. And underlying all of this is just a lack of trust, right? You just, again, putting people together. And like here, talk about your most intimate, deep, dark secrets. You also have monopolistic behavior. And while at the beginning of the group, I know this has happened to me, where I'm just thankful that somebody's talking and it's not me. Like I appreciate the conversation that this person is having. However, that can't remain that way, right? And so you have to be able to encourage other people to speak. And that's where, again, you as the counselor and the group leader, you may have to use some of your blocking skills and some other techniques to curtail that behavior. Storytelling. This is when a client is talking about a situation and not necessarily about themselves in that situation. And so the focus is on the events, and not necessarily the cognition or the rationale behind the behaviors. And it can be counterproductive as opposed to healing and meaningful, because folks can tell a story and it can be helpful. It again, as the group leader, you need to be able to distinguish when it's more of a distraction, or we're just being entertained by this story, versus I'm telling you something I've never told anyone, and I need to expose that secret, if you will, and bring it out into the light. And that those two different things, but you want to make sure that you don't have the storyteller who's just telling you an interesting story. And then you're going to have the one that gives advice. Well, you should do this. You should or shouldn't do that. You ought to be doing this. This is the person that is, I don't want to say know-it-all, but definitely having, giving more suggestions and perhaps not necessarily taking the suggestions. And then, of course, you have the intellectualization, where you might have a client that thinks about it and understands it academically, and it makes perfect sense as they're speaking and saying these things to you, and that's it. And they can come up with fancy explanations and rationales and all these different things, but they don't ever get past the cognition of the issue. It's still very intellectual. It's a talking point, and we're just not talking about the emotion of it. So challenges to the group leader now. Just so happens that this is a perfect time to incorporate the 4 agreements, right? And I would just like to preface the 2 that we're going to also be talking about tonight. Don't take things personally, and don't make assumptions, right? And so if you just keep those in mind for a moment while we go through some challenges to the group leader, right? This is where you can have those particular behaviors we just spoke about with those particular clients. Your reaction to that is going to be very, very important, right? And if you're not taking things personally and you're not making assumptions, right, you are going to be able to describe observable behaviors, as opposed to, you know what, you're being a real jerk. Well, let's describe the behaviors. You're coming late, you don't participate, and you talk over people. Okay, those are observable behaviors, right? As a group leader, you also need to monitor your countertransference with regards to any interactions that you have with your clients. Explore the conflict rather than retreating from it. So let's lean into what's uncomfortable rather than avoiding it, because it's, oh gosh, maybe people will be angry or upset. And then also meeting your own needs at the expense of the client. So is it easier for me just to avoid the conflict because I have an issue dealing with conflict? Or, when you have a really good productive group, right? Then the behaviors that you're seeing either in the clients and or in the group leader, then you have to be able to work through those things so that they're not working for either the group member or for yourself, right? So once you start working on these, the replacement behaviors is what you're going to see, right? And even the most experienced group leader is going to have group members who pose a challenge to them. And that's really why like the group rules and expectations are so important, and also supervision, so that when you experience these challenging behaviors, and again, I only mentioned 5, and there's probably another 5 to 6, 7 more of them, that when you encounter those things, that you have someone yourself that you can go to. Okay, so effective confrontation, right? And this is really the heart and soul of this particular stage of group, right? This is caring versus being aggressive, right? When you are able, as the group leader and a group member, to show care and concern for the person sitting in that group with you, it really does encourage people to wrestle with things that are uncomfortable. It can promote insight and awareness. It can reduce resistance. It can promote open communication, and really just lead to changes in behaviors, emotions, and thoughts, right? When it's done with care, there's lack of judgment. Even in your language, the words that you use, your body language, all of that expresses care and concern, as opposed to what we all are very familiar with, being aggressive, expressing hostility, insults, sarcasm. This is a real big thing that people don't realize, how destructive sarcasm can be. And I often put that in the category of like a verbal aggression, especially like, for example, when you're working with students and you go, oh, nice job, when let's say they spilled something or they broke something. So now when they actually do a nice job, let's say they did well in a particular project, and you go, nice job, how are they supposed to discern what it is that you're talking about, right? So sarcasm really has no place in the therapeutic setting, because it conveys verbally one thing, but the process is something different. So really do stay away from that piece of it. What else? All right. So always monitoring transference, countertransference, and parallel processing. And I know that concept, the last one, parallel processing, is not necessarily in the book, but I came across this when I was working in groups, and it was a hard concept for me to process. So I thought to put it out here so you have some time to work on it and experience it and learn about it. So transference is the feelings from a past relationship that gets redirected onto the counselor. So that goes from your client to the counselor. And then countertransference is when the counselor redirects their own feelings from a previous relationship on the client. And then parallel processing is when the therapist's countertransference and the client's transference are reflected in the relationship between the therapist and the supervisor. And these are all phenomenon. They're relatively well researched, and it's something for you to be aware of. And I experienced countertransference with a particular client who reminded me of a previous colleague of mine that I had a very, very bad experience with. And I was processing it one day with my supervisor, and I was describing, I was like, he's so difficult, he's argumentative, and I just kept describing things. And she just said to me very succinctly, she goes, who does he remind you of? And I was like, oh, you're so right. And that was an eye-opening experience for me, because I was blindsided by it. I know what countertransference is, but it got me. I didn't recognize it. It had to be pointed out to me. And that's why supervision is so important, because you have an extra set of eyes, therapeutic eyes, that can support you in this process, especially with group. There's so many different things going on in group that it is very helpful that you have that supervision. And when you bring the different relationships or feelings from relationships into the supervisory relationship, it's just something for you to be definitely mindful of. Okay. Um, let's see. Next one. Okay. So really underneath all of this stuff, right, what you're really tussling with is establishing trust in your group, right? And this is how you're going to know as a group leader the level of trust, as I have here on the slide, right? Conflict is a part of the group process. And with conflict comes intimacy. If there's no conflict, this is an indicator that there's a lack of trust, because why would I even want to engage anything with you? Because it's just not worth my time. Group members wrestle with some fears of making fools of themselves, maybe losing control, being rejected, singled out, or judged. The main role of a group leader in the transitional stage is to promote a safe environment with clear boundaries. Group leaders also need to intervene in the group in a sensitive and timely manner to encourage group members to face and resolve conflicts and other negative reactions within the group. And if you're doing that as a group leader and you have group members that are willing to engage, the level of trust will start to increase, right? And so you're going to see people who weren't necessarily participating actually participating, and not just running their mouth participating, but making meaningful contributions. They're going to be taking risks. They're going to be telling you about what they're struggling with, right? They're going to be working on their personal issues. And equally as important, they're going to be supporting other people in the group too, in a meaningful, caring, compassionate way, right? And once you tussle with this, and you're going to sense that we all of a sudden are going to start making some progress. We're going to be talking about some more meaningful conversations and topics. And this is when you're going to go into the working stage, right? There's no clear cut after week 7, we're going to be in this stage. It's really the interactions between the clients more so with each other in the group that's going to signify the working stage, right? And for a group to reach the working stage, it is essential that members make a commitment to face and work through barriers that interfere with the group's progress, which at this point they have, or they've wrestled with enough of them that they can kind of go into the working stage. That's not to say that they're always going to be there. You may go back into a transition stage depending on what happens in the group, but these are going to be some of your characteristics of the working stage. There's going to be more integration, greater depth of your conversations, more self-disclosure. There's going to be more feedback from group members, and group members are going to be taking responsibility. They're going to be less dependent on the group leader. There's definitely going to be more cohesion. And then on the part of the group leader, really your role then becomes to encourage feedback. You're going to deepen that self-disclosure. Well, tell me more about that. What does that mean to you, right? Making the process statements. Translate member insight into action. Okay, now that you're aware of this, where do you want to go with it, right? And so this is a cute little, we're in the woods and we're making progress, but we're not out of the woods yet, right? And so this sounds wonderful, and it is wonderful, and this is really what you want to do. This is like your cruising altitude, right? You're doing well here, and you want to make sure that you don't go backwards. I don't want to say that either. You may go backwards, but the idea is that you're still making progress. You still have work to do, even in this working stage, right? And so basically that's the sum total of my presentation, but I do have a fun little activity I want to do with you. So let's see. Let's get ready to rumble. All right, y'all. These are 4 statements that a group leader gave that's very ineffective to help deal with um, a, a client that was not, let's say, acting appropriately in group. If you just take one and reformulate that into a better statement that addresses that you are confronting the client, but it is a more therapeutic statement, that's your assignment. And you have 2 minutes to come up with the statement. Uh-oh, did I turn it off? Oh, go ahead. What about you? Deal with that confrontation. Come on. All right. Does anybody want to share what they wrote as far as giving a more effective response?
I can share. Okay, so number one, you're always giving everyone advice. I wish you would just focus on yourself. I would remind them of the meta theme of counseling and say, look, our job is not to tell people what to do. Maybe not in that, it would be cloaked. Remember what we're trying to do here. We're not saying do this or that. What we're trying to do is uncover the faulty thinking and reasoning that we're going through. So we don't want to go forward to what you should do. Let's take a step backwards and try to see what's in the machine that's producing these. So, yeah.
So reminding them of why they're here and the work that needs to get done.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else? Betty, are you okay driving? You're scaring me. Okay. All right.
No, I'm fine. I'm looking straight ahead.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, come on.
I wrote in the chat for number 2, hey, blank, I've noticed you haven't shared with the group. However, you appear to be engaged. How might sharing with your peers improve your experience in group?
So a more open-ended question, right? To an open-ended question to really deal with the problematic behavior that's going on in group, right? These are really good examples of how to use confrontation in not what we think of, right? Let's get ready to rumble or getting ready for a boxing match. It doesn't have to be that, right? And if you are able to reframe, what we traditionally think of confrontation as, I'm gonna, well, you think you're gonna, that's not what happens in group. And if you're able to practice this in your everyday life, Like if you're on the phone with customer service and they're, being a little not customer servicey, you're practice those skills of acknowledging what's going on and let's talk about it. That sort of thing. Anyone else want to share one more before we go? Come on, one more.
The screaming fists were disturbing.
What was that? Me?
No, the picture of your screaming fists that you had in the presentation.
Oh, isn't that weird?
That was disturbing. That was
Yes.
freaking out, man.
I saw that.
I agree. I was looking at my own fist, like imagining faces on them. It was weird.
I actually love that.
Oh, yes.
That's some good photoshopping there. I wish I could take credit for it, but not me.
It looks like Trump on the right.
Yeah. So again, and I hope what you've gotten out of some of this is that confrontation is very necessary. It can be very therapeutic, and it can also really sharpen your skills as a counselor, because many times, again, we are conditioned to shy away from conflict and just avoid it ourselves. And so now we're put into a situation where not only do we need to encourage it, but we need to be able to manage and navigate it too. But once you see the therapeutic value of it, it will just encourage you to do it more and more. And it won't be just, again, in your therapeutic world, it will be in your personal life too, and vice versa, that sort of thing. All right. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure, Catherine.
So we're talking about conflict, and it's one thing for two members to have a conflict, because then you as the leader can be like a referee. But what if the member, or what if more than one member is having conflict with the counselor, like open conflict during the session?
Well, again, I'm going to bring it back to the 4 agreements, right? We're not going to take it personally, and we're not going to make assumptions. So we're not taking that. They're not having an issue with me, Patricia. They might be having an issue with something else, and so that's what I have to work on with them. So you're bored in the group. Tell me more about what you would like to see in the group, right? Because it's their responsibility to do the work, right? And if they're upset with me about something that I either did or didn't do, then we can have that conversation. Let's talk about observable behaviors. Well, when this person said this, you didn't do that. Okay, I see your point. Let's talk about that some more. But I'm not taking it personally, because I can't manage everything all of the time. I can't be perfect every time I'm in that group, right? And so there will be those times when, you know what, I had a little bit of a brain fart. I was, thinking about lunch or whatever, and I missed that. And the beauty of group is that you can always go back and revisit that. So and so brought this to my attention that last week when this conversation was had, that I missed it. And when he brought it to my attention, and when I reflected back on it, he was right that I did miss that. And so I would like to revisit that. But that's important, that you, again, don't take things personally and don't assume, right? Let's ask those clarifying questions. Well, what exactly are you referring to? And many times I would always ask my clients to, when they would say, oh, that person's such a jerk, and that's not the word they used, right? I'd say, just, well, what do you mean by that? Give me some behaviors. And they'd look at me like, you don't know what a jerk is? No, because my definition of a jerk, it might be different than your definition of a jerk. So I want to know what the behaviors are so we can actually talk about the behaviors. And so now they had to think about, well, why are they? Well, what makes them a jerk? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a minute, I do some of that too. Right? And so it was definitely some insight when, it's so easy to go and point the finger at someone else. But then when you describe the behaviors, it's like, well, do you engage in that behavior, those behaviors too? So it's confrontation can be very therapeutic, as long as, again, you are mindful of your own emotions